I'm Desmond Shawe-Taylor, the surveyor of the Queen's Pictures, and this is Vermeer's music lesson, so-called. The painting was acquired by George III in the 1760s from the British consul in Venice, Consul Smith. He acquired it along with a huge library and an extraordinary collection of paintings, most of them 18th century Venetian, including 50 Canalettos. So this was not really the highlight of the collection at all. At that date it was attributed to Frans van Mieris. Nobody really knew who Vermeer was. And indeed, in the early 19th century, this was considered not even a very good example of Frans van Mieris's work, and it was thought possibly that it could be by Willem van Mieris, his son. And it was only in the 1860s that the great expert on Vermeer, Théophile Thoré, identified it as a Vermeer, and at the same time identified Vermeer as a great artist, somebody who previously had not really figured in anybody's mind. It describes a probably specific interior with absolutely miraculous lucidity and accuracy. And it's possible to reconstruct what we see in this painting very, very precisely. We see a room which probably in reality would be 3 windows deep. We see 2 of the windows. The perspective is absolutely precisely correct and demands quite a close viewpoint, which means that the viewpoint is quite like a wide-angle experience, a wide-angle lens, so that to correctly view the painting, really absolutely to get the full experience, you would need to go with one eye and approach quite closely to a position about there to get that full experience. The interior is so accurately depicted that Vermeer has even shown a reflection of the easel upon which he is painting in the mirror on the wall behind, expressing the idea that this room exists in reality, and it existed before I came along as the painter to record it. Beautifully created space, beautifully described reality. But what's happening in this room? And I think the answer to that question is, well, we can see music is being played, but specifically the title music lesson, I think it can't be right. That's its nickname that it's acquired over the years. But the man, the gentleman, who is depicted here, is clearly far too well dressed to be a music teacher. That would be a fairly lowly profession. He has a cane, which is a grand gentleman's accessory, but he also wears a sword. Quite an unusual thing in Holland in the 17th century, and very much an indicator of high social class. And of course, he is extremely well dressed. So I think we must assume that he is a guest or husband or gentleman of some kind, and certainly not a music teacher. More recently, it's tended to be suggested that he is a man listening to the lady playing on the virginal. I would suggest that he's actually singing. This is because if you look closely, you can see that his mouth is opening and he's actually showing some teeth, something that you don't do a lot of in the 17th century. And the one thing that tends to unite depictions of people with their mouths open is that they're singing. It's a way of indicating singing, which then brings on to the question which is often asked about Vermeer and is often asked about Dutch genre painting in general. What is the subtext? What's this all about? We know what they're doing, and we know that what they're doing is beautifully described, but what's the sort of bigger picture, as it were? And in this respect, I think that one element which is hugely important in Dutch figurative painting is the element of the imagination of the viewer. And one way that this works, I suppose, is if you said a painting depicts miraculous reality, but it depicts the reality which can only be perceived by one sense, the sense of sight. A painting obviously has no power to depict the other senses, smell, touch, and so on. And in this case, I think it's obvious which sense we are invited to employ our imagination. It's clearly the sense of hearing. And I think the main prompt here, it's a very, very clever one, and we get to the prompt or the cue that's making us think like this by asking the question, what is wrong with this picture? What's unexpected or surprising about it? And there's one thing that is blazingly, blazingly obvious. The principal character is standing with her back to us at the back of the room. And that is the prompt that is inviting us to say to ourselves, we can't see her, but of course we don't need to see her because we can hear her. And that's one of the things obviously about sound is if you're in a space like this, a very, very clearly described interior, relatively spacious but not huge, with a musical instrument playing at the back of the room. These figures might look to us a certain distance away, but we are going to hear them loud and clear because sound reverberates in such a space absolutely precisely, so that we know in reality if we had interrupted a musical afternoon, a musical party of this kind, the air would be filled with sound, just as it is filled with light and air and space. The virginal has on its the underside of its lid, it has a quotation written upon it, which is absolutely standard for instruments of this kind. And often in Dutch genre painting, that quotation is used as a slight commentary on the action in the painting. In this case, the words are in Latin. Music is the accompaniment to delight and the consolation or the medicine for sorrows. And that suggests that the image is about the quality, the power of music, the delight, but also the almost therapeutic power of music. In the division of the surface of the canvas, there are very, very clear horizontal and vertical lines dividing up this space very carefully into intervals. And obviously one of the characteristics of music is that it is made up of intervals, and that the intervals of sound in music correspond precisely to intervals of distance. And so that if you looked inside the lid of that virginal, you would see that the string lengths were very precise mathematical intervals, and that those precise mathematical intervals gave you precise harmonic intervals. So it suggests that Vermeer is almost saying, look at all these perfect musical intervals across the surface of this painting, how harmonious they are, how comparable visually this effect is to the harmony of sounds.